I always say there's two questions that completely changed my life. And the first one was I stopped asking what job do I want? And I started asking what I want my life to look like. And when I made that change, that changed everything for me. So I did this exercise where I wrote down, 5 years from now, like, what does my ideal life look like? And in 4 different categories, and try to be as detailed as I could. And I realized that the path that I was on was never going to take me to where I wanted to go.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to be chatting with Josiah Goff, who wears several hats as well. He runs product for Tune, and he's also got at least one podcast cooking at any one time, and who knows what else is coming down the pike. So let's touch, Josiah, by talking about your journey into the content creation realm and how it actually ended up becoming part of your day job as well.
Yeah. So how long do you have here? They're kind of interwoven because it really goes back to 2017. I have a diverse background. I started when I was in school, I was a music major. And then my junior year of college, my professor randomly asked me if I could build him a website. I was like, I just got a MacBook. I can totally build you a website. And so I built him this really crappy iWeb website and just fell in love with that and started getting into, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was starting the content creation journey there. And shortly after I graduated, I was hired by a nonprofit locally here in Chattanooga to basically be their creative department. And so I got all kinds of skills from that, like, documentary filmmaking and web development and design and all of that. And that sort of set me on this path of in marketing and technology. And I led the marketing technology team for a software company in Bellingham, Washington, and then I leaned more into the software engineering side and worked at a startup for a while. And around that time is when I realized that what I was really passionate about was product. And so I started transitioning over into the product space. And I had worked my whole career to get up to this point to become a product manager. I had landed this, this really cushy product manager job at this hip tech company, and I was really excited about it. And I was there for about 1.5 years. And one afternoon, my boss schedules a meeting on a bench outside of the office. So the hairs on the back of my neck were already kind of standing up, right? So then I walk up, and as I'm walking up, I can just see by his posture, his whole energy, like there was a tension in the air, like you could cut with a knife. And I thought to myself, I'm about to get fired. Like, my monkey brain started racing. Like, what am I going to tell my wife? We have a 1-year-old. What are my coworkers going to think? And so I walked up and I sat down, and it turned out I wasn't getting fired. I was getting demoted. And what he told me was that I was a good fit for the company, but I didn't have what it takes to be a product manager. And so they were giving me the option. I could either leave or I could go over to engineering, which to me was a demotion because I didn't want to go back to engineering at all. I love product. And it was a really hard conversation because I had said essentially, like, here's everything I've done in this last 1.5 years that I've been here. I've hit every number I've ever been given. Like, I've gone out of my way to also do things that helps the product team be more efficient. Just tell me what you need me to do, where you need me to be, and I can get there. I just don't know what that is. And he said, we don't have time for you to get there. And so I did what any sane person would do. And I said, okay, I'll be an engineer. So I could have a job while I went and looked for another job, basically. And I went through this experience where I started applying to and interviewing for other jobs. Funny enough, so this was 2017. Tune was one of them, and I didn't even make it past the like phone screen with Tune. And I felt like I was just interviewing for the same job over and over again. Like I was just going to be in the same position, and it caused me to step back. And I always say there's two questions that completely changed my life. And the first one was I stopped asking what job do I want? And I started asking what I want my life to look like. And when I made that change, that changed everything for me. So I did this exercise where I wrote down, 5 years from now, like what's my ideal life look like, and in 4 different categories, and try to be as detailed as I could. And I realized that the path that I was on was never going to take me to where I wanted to go. And so I had this realization one afternoon, went and talked to my wife that night, which I was terrified of. And I had the conversation, and she said, I've been waiting for you to figure this out for a while. Like, you just do what you need to do. I support you. We'll figure it out. Right. Cause she's awesome. So, and then the next day I walked in and I quit, and I said, I'm done. And I walked out, with my stuff that day. And it was terrifying and exciting, and all of that wrapped into one. And I went from making 6 figures to nothing overnight, awesome benefits package to nothing, right? And then I had a 1-year-old, and we were in this apartment in Nashville. We only had like 2 months of cash in the bank, like for runway. And so I moved us out of our apartment into my in-laws' basement here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And and then a week later, by the way, we found out we were pregnant with baby number 2. So that just added to the intensity of the situation.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure at all. And so but what the thing that changed for me was by removing that safety net, because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do for money. I had some skills I knew I could fall back on, but I knew nothing about freelancing or starting my own business or anything like that. But what I got from that was, by cutting that safety net, it forced me to confront all of the unhelpful thought patterns and behaviors and beliefs and habits that was not serving me well. And my boss, who demoted me, he was right about a lot of stuff. Like, I had a really bad victim mentality. I had, I was afraid of failure. I couldn't, I had a hard time having conversations. Hard conversations, I would shut down. And there was just a lot that I didn't want to deal with in my life. And this forced me to do that. And so thankfully I learned really early that, especially as a solopreneur, my business is a direct reflection of me. So if I want to grow my business, I've got to grow myself first. And so I started on that journey of personal transformation and went through, if that's interesting, we can get into that, but I completely like reprogrammed myself essentially and became a new person. And it was, I feel like 3 years of, running my own business was like 10 years of personal development all crammed into that time. And it was amazing. And I ended up starting my own web and marketing agency, just a small one, and took it to 250,000 in 2 years, and like going from not knowing anything to like figuring it out. And it was all because I was working on myself first and doing that inner work to prepare me to be the person who could do that. So to answer your question about how I got into content creation, part of that journey was really learning marketing and business and how to attract an audience and how to, take them through that process of, a funnel and building trust with them and getting them to buy and everything. And so I decided I was going to start a podcast, to start attracting more of my target customer for my agency. And I was serving professional content creators at the time. So people who had like 6-figure blogs. And I so I started this podcast called Content Heroes, and it was the original intention was to sort of act as a top of funnel, just attract those people. But as soon as I started the podcast, I absolutely fell in love with podcasting, and I realized that I am a content creator. And I think a lot of my life I was not either acknowledging that or accepting that. I don't know what it was, but I had always said, and I never really knew what job I wanted to have, but the only thing I could think of doing for the rest of my life was sitting down and having, really interesting conversations with really cool people, and maybe drinking a glass of whiskey and while we're doing it, right? And then I realized, like, that's podcasting, right? So maybe without the whiskey sometimes, but I started that. That was another thing. I jumped in, and I figured out as I was going along, and it started within 2 or 3 months. I went from no one knew who I was to I was sitting down and talking and interviewing some of my marketing heroes, like Jay Bear and Ann Handley and Chris Ducker, like these people who they had no reason to sit down with me. But that was like the power of podcasting. And not only was I getting having these amazing conversations, and we were, I've got, 100 hours of free coaching from all of this basically. But we were recording it and sharing it with an audience and helping others. And there was just something about it. Was the first time I really created something and put it out in the world, created something from nothing. And there was nothing like that feeling. Like I'd never experienced something like that before. And that was a big part of it too. And I had some surreal experiences where, people they would post in my Facebook group that I had at the time that they were heading to a business conference, and they binge listened to the whole podcast, because they were driving like 8 hours or whatever. And so they like on 2x speed, listened to all the episodes, and they loved it. And it was just, all these fun things that never would have happened if I hadn't done that initial work to first realize that I am, I have a vision for my life, and the way that I'm heading doesn't line up with that. And so I have to make a change, and I'll figure it out as I go along. And it was a wild ride. But it was a lot of fun.
Well, that's certainly great advice, I think, for a lot of folks who never have that epiphany about where do they want to be with their life, and they sort of compartmentalize the job and the life separately. And they don't realize that they really feed off of each other. So how did you come across this Engram 5 concept and decide that was going to be your second blog?
Yeah. So to answer that question, I kind of have to get into what happened in 2020. So I'd started Content Heroes in 2019. And what I realized through all that was I really wanted to pivot to focusing on building a business as a content creator. And I didn't actually enjoy running an agency. I'm just not really an agency guy. And so I had made a decision early 2020 to start slowly transitioning to where I'm focusing less on the agency and focusing more on growing my content business. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. Everything shut down March, April, and all my projects started getting canceled with the agency. I had to let go of all of the team that I was working with. And and by the way, we found out we were pregnant with baby number 3 at the end of 2019. So in the middle of this, I know there's a pattern, right? So we spent lockdown in like a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 toddlers and a pregnant wife, and it was the greatest test of my mental health that I think I've ever had in my life. It was rough, but I was still continuing to create content and to move forward with Content Heroes. But I realized in that time I just had a shift in priorities, and part of it was I had also developed a story around what it meant to be an entrepreneur. A big shift for me that happened when I left my job was I stopped attaching my identity to my job. But what I didn't realize was I attached it to being an entrepreneur. And I had this whole story about how I quit my job and I, became the successful entrepreneur. And I didn't want to let go of that. And I had to work through that and realize that being an entrepreneur is about who you are, not what you do. And I can be an entrepreneur inside of someone else's company if I find the right company. And so I really miss product, and I really felt like I never got to really reach my full potential in product, and I miss being part of a larger team. And so I set some criteria looking for a job to a company to join so that I could have a steady income while I build up my creator business on the side. And I went through, over the course of 8 months, I got to final round 7 times before I found the right fit. And it was a Tune, and it was one of my big. So Tune is an affiliate marketing platform, a partner marketing platform. And when I joined, my big criteria is I still wanted to serve content creators, and so when I joined, I was the product manager for the Tune Pay team, which meant I literally spent every day helping content creators get paid. And so it was a perfect fit. And then over the course of the next 2 years, I went from senior product manager to director to now VP. But that would have never happened if I hadn't spent the prior 3 years running my own business, doing all of that work on myself to be that type of person. But what happened with Enneagram 5, so for those who aren't familiar, the Enneagram is a personality typing system, and there are 9 different types, and they're labeled by numbers. And I'm a type 5, and then one of my best friends is also a type 5. And so I joined Tune in November of 2020. I put Content Heroes on pause for the holidays to, ramp up in my new job. And I'd plan on spinning it back up at the beginning of the year once I kind of got settled. But during that time in December, my friend Cody and we decided, we had this idea to start a podcast about being an Enneagram 5. We've been trying to figure out a podcast we could do together. And my criteria was, I'm very busy. I have a lot going on. So one, it has to be a topic that I can sit down and talk about for hours without needing to prepare anything for. And then I said, and you're going to do all of the work on the editing side, because I'm not doing that. Not for this. And he was like, deal. So we basically set up sort of a series of tests. The first one was, do we enjoy recording and talking about this? So we sat down and recorded in December, and yeah, it was a ton of fun. And I knew then we had something. And then the second test was, would anyone listen to it? And so we launched it, and within the first week, we were in the top 10% of all podcasts in terms of downloads in the first 7 days. Because we niched down hard. So it's called the podcast is called Enneagram 5. And literally all we're doing is we're talking about what life is like as this specific personality type. And we dig in on each episode, just focuses and goes deep on one aspect of life. And so the cool thing, this is super nerdy, so sorry for anyone who's not into the Enneagram, but the way that it's structured, there are different ways to sort of use the Enneagram. And one of the ways is you have what are called wings. So if you have I'm a type 5, the numbers next to that number can be your wings. And so what that means is you normally have a more dominant one. And so I'm a 5-wing 4, he's a 5-wing 6. And so we kind of have that covered in terms of the breadth of that experience. And then what we did was one of the reasons why, aside from our own personal desire to do this podcast, we were really disappointed with the resources out there for Enneagram 5s. There was nothing out there specifically for it. And all the other Enneagram resources typically they're either looking at like the Enneagram as a whole. And so if it's a podcast, they'll do like one episode on a number and then another episode on like it's very broad. And that means that it's usually staying pretty surface level. There's some that are great that'll go into 5, but then it's like an episode. And so we wanted to create something where we just like are digging deep on everything, but we didn't want it just to be us. So one of the other things that we did that I really think set us apart was we before each episode we submit questions for that episode to the community, and they record their own takes on the topic, and then we pull those in. And then my co-host Cody is also a musician, so he writes and records custom music for every episode, and sometimes tailored to each response. And so it's this very highly produced, really immersive audio experience as well. And there's nothing else out there like that. And that's why as soon as we launched, it just took off. And I think we did so with Content Heroes. It took me a little over a year to get to 10,000 downloads. We did that in less than 2 months with Enneagram 5, and it's just taken off from there. And then we built a community around it, and now we're looking at how we can expand and build even more resources.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to delve a little bit more deeply into is a lot of folks, they put content in a silo, right? And what you did is you layered community into content. And so if marketers are sort of struggling with this idea, so does content belong in a silo, or do I also attempt to create a community, right? How do you recommend they frame that in their heads as they decide, is this content in a silo, or is this content that has the potential to grow a community?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on what you're trying to achieve with the content. Obviously there's content that's meant to sell, and then there's content that's meant to attract, and then there's content that's meant to sort of retain and build trust. And so when we were making this decision, a lot of it was us scratching our own itch. We didn't really know any other fives, and so we wanted to build a community. And so when we went to make this decision, it was more about, let's test and see if this is the type of content that you can build a community around. And so we just started experimenting with it. And so what we did is we set up a custom community on Circle, because we wanted to have more ownership of the platform instead of doing a Facebook group. And we instead of posting each episode on our website, we post each episode publicly inside of the community. So anytime we link back to an episode page, it's linking back to the community. So anytime someone in the show notes clicks that link, they discover the community. And then another thing that we do is we also wanted to, we didn't want it to just be about us. And so we wanted to create conversation, and that's another big piece of it too. And that's hard to do with podcasting. That's what we were trying to figure out was, we can, he and I can have a conversation and we can pull in some other voices, but we wanted to expand it as much as we could. And so when that was another motivation for each episode becomes a post in the community. And then when we're sending people back to that, we're saying, hey, if you want to see what other Enneagram 5s think about this episode, check out this post in the community. And then if they want to join the conversation, it's really easy. They just click a button and sign up, and then they can post their comments and stuff. And then when they're in there doing that, the cool thing is the difference between posting that on a blog and having just a comment section on each blog post is the people who are already part of the community that will show up in their feed. So when anyone joins and they post, it'll show up in the other members' feeds, and so then that sparks more conversation around it. And so that's how we organically built the community. We haven't run paid ads, we haven't done it's all been just organic growth. And because we set up these structures that help incentivize and encourage conversation and building community, not just with us, but within that group of people.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that you wanted to sort of stay away from a Facebook group, for example, and sort of own the community a little bit more tightly. And that's a thread that I'm starting to hear a lot from content creators, is that they're realizing that by building their entire content experience exclusively on one platform, that they don't actually have control, because algorithms change and visibility metrics change, and ability to monetize changes, right? A rule changes with regards to, what level of distribution you get if you're branded content versus non-branded content, like all these factors that perhaps the content creators didn't take into account as they were first led by the passion for the topic to suddenly blow up. And then they're like, wait a minute, I need to actually pay some bills, right? And they realize, like, if they don't have any ownership at all, if they don't have an email list, if they don't have other things that other ways of communicating with their fans, that they're a little bit like out on a limb. And was that part of your thought process at all, or was it really more along the lines of, I just need ownership, like I don't want to have my community out where we're in the wild?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Me being a product guy too, I understand how companies think about the products that they're building and what their motivations and incentives are. And I know that, Facebook, for example, their motivation is to keep people on the platform as much as possible so that they can sell ads, because that's their business model. And sometimes those incentives and line up with my needs and my desires, and oftentimes they don't. And same for my audience. And so that was a big part of it. And then, there are other Facebook groups for Enneagram 5s, but there's something about, I don't know if it's like just the energy on Facebook, but a lot of times they become kind of toxic. And we wanted to be able to really tailor the experience and make sure that if you're in the community, it's because you intentionally want to be contributing to the community, and not because you were scrolling across Facebook and you saw that there's a community, I'm just going to join, and then I'm just going to, blast like every post with, negative comments and stuff like that. So that was a lot of our intention behind doing it on Circle versus something like Facebook.
I would imagine most folks don't know which Enneagram they are, or if they are in fact a 5 or not. So how do people end up discovering the community if they don't know what personality type they are?
Yeah, so this was another very intentional decision. Is we never did any content around here's what it means to get started being in the Enneagram or being an Enneagram 5. We realized that there's a ton of content and resources out there for introducing people to the Enneagram, and we're not Enneagram experts. Like, that's never how we wanted to position ourselves. We don't want to teach people about the Enneagram. We just want to share our experiences and help foster community. And also if we're going to teach anything, it's going to be around how do you go from where you are as a 5 to where you want to be as a 5, because we all share a pretty common set of core challenges, and Cody and I have each experienced overcoming those challenges in different ways. So that's a big piece of it too. So and because of that, we're not targeting people who aren't familiar with the Enneagram. We're targeting people who you already know you're a 5, and you're now unsatisfied with the resources out there that are to help you go deeper and learn more about who you are and how you can improve upon yourself. And so that's why we didn't start at the top. We went further down in that. What do you call that? Awareness level.
Right. Do you recommend that people who have no idea which Enneagram they are find out?
Yeah, I definitely do. There's always there are pros and cons to any personality typing system, and I always warn against. This is just a tool to help you understand yourself better, understand how others better, and how you relate with them. This doesn't mean if I'm a 5, I'm in this box, and it doesn't mean that I ever do anything outside of this box, right? It's just a tool. And personally, I find the Enneagram to be the most helpful tool. Just the way that it's definitely one of the more complicated personality typing systems. So just be prepared for that. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but I find it extremely valuable and helpful because it's more dynamic than the others. It incorporates, not just kind of who you are at your core, but how then that expresses itself when you're stressed out or when you are, confident, and that gives you trajectories so that you're not just focused on who I am right now, but also who do I want to be, and who do I want to be in these certain situations, and what are sort of the levels of development that get me there. So I'm a big fan.
Great. Yeah, obviously. So, you continue to interact with a lot of content creators in both your day job and within your passion areas. And I'm curious to sort of advice you'd give to both the content creator side and to the marketer side as to how do they collaborate together, right, to create content that's authentic enough and good enough to accomplish the marketer's needs, but yet also, dovetail within what the creator wants to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great question. And this is something that, being part of Tune also plays into that dynamic, because our platform empowers those partnerships. And so, I see that for a lot from both sides. And so for me, coming from the content creator side, and then now working with, our customers who are on the partner marketing side, I think the first thing that you really need to keep in mind, if looking at this from a marketer standpoint, is we as content creators, we have poured our blood, sweat, and tears into building an audience that trusts us. And that trust is very, very hard earned, and it's easily lost if we make a mistake. And we're constantly aware of that. And so in any relationship, when you come as a partner marketer to us, to work with us to promote your product, we always have this in the back of our head, or in the front of our head, really, on, what is my audience going to get from this? What if this doesn't work for them? Are they going to stop trusting me? Am I going to lose their trust? And so we're very protective of that. And so if you're as you're reaching out and building relationships, anything you can do to show that you understand and empathize with where we are and everything that we've put into the things that we've created, the much better our working relationship is going to be. And so that's things like transparency and flexibility and integrity is a big thing too. And so those, they're the things that go into any working relationship. But there's our audience is our business, and and a lot of times it's our livelihood. And so we're very, very cautious to enter into any working partnership that might jeopardize that.
So it seems like what you're saying is certainly for a content creator of any scale, that the marketer should treat them individually and not sort of just package something up the same way you would package up a press release or package up a creative brief and just put it out there, but rather like take the time to learn about the creator, take the time to learn about their audience, and really craft something unique. That's difficult to do at scale, obviously. So you maybe can't do that for the long tail of content creators, but certainly for the ones you care more about, take the time, take a step back, think about what's the collaboration going to look like.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And honestly, I mean, not to promote Tune too much here, but that's one of the things that I really appreciated about our product and the company, is that they have that approach where we view our job as getting out of the way. Like, technology should not get in the way. So you can structure your partner program how you want to. And if you want to focus on having direct partnerships with individual creators and putting that work in, like, you can structure that. And then if you want to have your long tail on like a network where you're just posting an offer and anyone can come and take that offer, like, we allow that too. Like, there's so much flexibility in there, because that's a big part of our philosophy, is like, we're not going to dictate who. One of the things we talk about a lot is to really be what you really want is you're trying to build a community of brand champions as a partner marketer. And that takes intentional relationship building. And we are not going to dictate what that looks like for you, because it looks different for every business. And like who those brand champions will be, and how you want to go about doing that, and how to do it at scale. So that's our whole ethos, is helping you, give you the tools that allow you to build those relationships more at scale, and structure things the way that you want to.
Yeah, well, I'd love your point of view on something that we've been doing for clients increasingly, is rather than go out and find folks with audiences and then try to convince them the product or service is great, we've often found like mid-sized influencers within the customer set of the client already, right? As it went wearing my agency hat, right? And so then you have one less sale to make because they already like your product or service, and you're just trying to say, oh, by the way, could we collaborate on things? And it just sort of seems to be a little remove some of the friction. Have you seen that work in other scenarios?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a content creator, one of the things that we want to be able to say is I try this product myself and I, trust it. And a lot of times we won't promote anything that we don't use ourselves, because we going back to the trust that we've built with our audience is it's our currency. And so I think that's a great strategy, is looking first to your own customer base, and seeing how you can identify content creators within that group, because honestly, you're probably going to get a much better conversion rate from those people anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. We built some technology tapping into some of the identity graphs to do that, right? Cool. To try to figure out, okay, what are their social media handles, what are their follower counts, things like that. And it's improved. It's made it more easy to do that, right? To try to identify, do you have any hidden superstars within your customer base? And they're usually not going to be, they're not going to be Kardashian level, but they may still be able to move the needle for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what has you excited about the next year, wearing either hat, your content creator hat or your Tune hat?
A lot. I can get into both of those if you'd like. On the Tune side, we have some big things coming. I guess I can't talk about it too much, but one thing that has me really fired up is there's the problem of finding new quality partners to work with, and like qualifying them and onboarding them, like bringing them through a process that builds that trust, and like that is a hard problem, and it seems like a problem that everyone has, and I'm very fired up about solving that problem in a way that no one else is solving right now. So that's a big thing for me on the Tune side. And then on the content creator side, I have a lot going on, probably too much. For the Enneagram 5 community, we're ramping up building some process and some products to help with, like I said earlier, different aspects of being a 5 and the challenges that we have in helping overcome that. And so we're doing a couple of events to work directly with our community to surface what those problems are in their language, and then and brainstorm some solutions, and then that will turn into different products. And then on just my personal brand side, I'm writing a book, which I'm really excited about. Last summer, I wrote 50,000 words in 30 days for my initial manuscript. And then it's kind of been a process of going through the editing, which had I known that it would take this long, I probably wouldn't have started. So it's probably good that I didn't know that it would take this long. So I'm aiming to launch that book in the fall. And that is something that it's a lot of the stuff that I talked about here is sharing my journey, and really it's written for the person that has this voice in their head that what they want in life, what they want to create is not worth the effort, because that was the big thing that was really holding me back. And so I talked through why that's there, how it held me back, and how I overcame it, and what's possible on the other side of that. And then if I can create enough space for it, I really want to relaunch Content Heroes. I promised myself I wouldn't do it until I get my book out. Because I have to focus on one thing at a time. I also, I have 3 small kids and, full-time job and a couple of businesses on the side. So I know, there's it's a lot of things to juggle. But that's something to be looking out for. And, towards the end of the year, hopefully, where I can, once I get the book going, I can spin that back up, because I love having these conversations. On the Enneagram 5 side, it's really fun because Cody and I, my co-host, we've known each other for like 15 years. And so the feedback we get from it is, it feels like, I'm just sitting in a fireside chat with 2 old friends. And that's kind of what we wanted. And I forgot to mention too, the thing that about that podcast that really keeps us going is that we've had so many comments and DMs, like private messages from people saying, I finally feel seen. Like, I feel like I found my tribe, like that kind of stuff. Like I almost tear up thinking about, and all we're doing is just sharing ourselves and putting ourselves out there. And,
Right.
and it just really resonates with people and helps them feel like there's someone in the world who understands them, and there's a community that understands them. And so that's huge. But it's just, it's me and Cody, and, I like Cody. He's one of my best friends, but I can only have so many conversations with him. Like, I want to have conversations with other people too. Right. And, as I'm building up, more of a personal brand, there's a ton of creators that I'm meeting, and I'm like, I really want to just interview you on the podcast and get your take on some stuff. And so I'm excited to start that back up. I'm also, one of the big commitments that I made this year was to, create every day. And specifically, I've been writing, publishing online every day, whether it's a couple of tweets or like a more medium form post or something. Building that habit and that muscle is helping me become a better thinker and a better communicator as well. And then a lot of what I'm doing too is I'm testing content that I've written for my book to see like how different framing resonates, which pieces, people enjoy more than others. And that's helping me refine the message in my book as well as I'm going through the editing process. So yeah, a lot of stuff to be excited about.
That is super exciting. I look forward to following all of those adventures independently and seeing how they evolve over the year. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.